The first time the apex predator of Kepri 4 left a severed war thresher on my doorstep, I assumed it was an accident. The second time, when it arranged the carcass artfully beside my welcome mat and draped a garland of its own bioluminescent quills over my doorbell, I realized the galaxy's most efficient killer had started courting me like a very earnest, very misunderstood cat the size of a shuttle. I'd been on the moon for 18 days, and my memo to the colony board had not prepared me for this. Local megafauna demonstrates gift economy. Possible ritualized reciprocity. I had not written. Help, the all-taker is making me a charcuterie board out of nightmares. My name is Lena Ortega, xenobiologist, contract 7B, hazard pay denied because the colony registrar lists the all-taker as infrequent encounter. The registrar is a liar. The beast is 8 meters from nose to tail spike, 30 articulated spines that flare when it breathes, 4 forward-facing eyes like polished slag, and a mouth that unfolds like a flower filled with knives. It hunts everything, skitterflocks, dune lizards, armored programs that even our miners won't poke. The locals call it the all-taker because if it wants something, it stops belonging to anyone else. The colony calls it a problem. I call it, grudgingly, a neighbor. On the morning that matters, I found the third gift, a freshly stunned skyangler, still faintly crackling with residual electroplaques, laid neatly beside my pressure door. The all-taker crouched half-visible in the red fern shadows, watching me with the awkward patience of a child presenting a crayon drawing. I could feel the tremor of its breathing through the aluminum walkway. It had carried the angler halfway across the basalt flats, a feat that would have impressed me if it hadn't looked so much like an invitation to cannibalize the research budget for a bigger freezer. You can't keep doing this, I said, because my brain refuses to differentiate between talking to beasts and filling out forms. My suit mic clicked on, translating my voice into the all-taker's hearing range with a soft subsonic thrum. It tilted its head. Its spines did the shimmering wave that I had very tentatively labeled, pleased, in my notes. Behind me, the habitat speakers crackled. Dr. Ortega, came Supervisor Sue's voice, tight with the kind of politeness that means lawyers. We've had 3 complaints from greenhouses A through C about predatory activity inside colony perimeter. Please address your situation. Working on it, I said, and muted the channel before she could ask why there was a smoking fish on her camera feed. I crouched, palms open. The all-taker watched. When I reached toward the angler, it did a little nose scoot, gently pushing the gift closer like, accept. Share. Belong. Thank you, I said carefully. Generous prey. It was the closest phrase I'd mapped to its gift lexicon. The spines rippled again. Good. I picked up the angler by the tail. A half-dozen colonists stared from the path, pretending not to. I pretended, with equal enthusiasm, that I always received tributes from death incarnate before breakfast. The unusual part wasn't that a predator was provisioning me. It happens on Earth, ravens, foxes, more cats than is strictly healthy. The unusual part was that the all-taker was not an opportunist. It was a keystone terror that the rest of the ecosystem orbited like planets around a sun. If it started refusing kills in favor of delivering them to a human, that was behavior rewriting itself on civilizational scales. The humorous part, though I was the only one laughing, was that the beast had apparently decided my modular habitat was its den annex. Every night, it patrolled the perimeter. Every morning, it left a gift. Every afternoon, a security drone chased it off, because the insurance underwriter had flagged apex predator habituation as a premium voiding phrase. The drone had the personality of a stapler, and the flight pattern of a drunk bee. The all-taker tolerated it the way mountains tolerate rain. I hauled the angler inside. My lab smelled like sterile plastic and stubborn cooking. I'd been perfecting a "please don't eat me" bread recipe with local yeasts, because I suspected scent mattered. I slid the fish into the Deccan. Shoot and watched the beast through the porthole. It lowered its head to my footprints, inhaled deeply, and made a quiet chuffing noise I hadn't heard before. My heart did a small, terrified gymnastic routine. Every instinct screamed at me to lock the shutters. I didn't. I went outside again, holding a chunk of yesterday's bread like an idiot offering biscotti to a bear. "Trade," I said, laying the bread on the walkway and backing up. The all-taker inched forward until its whisker-like forelimb cilia touched the crust. It recoiled, sneezed, and then, very delicately, took the bread between two of its inner mandibles and tucked it, not into its mouth, but into the pouch of skin under its lower jaw. Storage. Like my apron pocket. It hummed. My suit pinged, incoming worker shuttle. On the far ridge, a dust plume rose where the mining company's rigs chewed at the stone. I watched the beast watch the sky, and the stakes arranged themselves with dreadful clarity. If I couldn't demonstrate control, or at least understanding, the board would authorize a cull. The miners had already petitioned for it. Their petition used words like safety and sovereignty. It did not use words like wonder or kin or the slow joy of learning a grammar no one had charted. "Dr. Ortega." Sue again, sharper. "One of our perimeter cams shows the animal approaching hydroponics. Do not engage. Security is en route." "No," I said too fast. "Please recall them. The drone agitates it." "Noted," she said, which is supervisor for ignored. "If the creature damages infrastructure, our hands are tied." The all-taker turned toward the greenhouses. It moved with the light-footed gravity of a creature that knows everything else will move first. I jogged alongside, trying to look like I was in charge of an animal that could sweep me into a fine red mist. A group of kids pressed their faces to the reinforced glass as we passed. One of them waved a paper drawing, me standing on a mountain of fish, the beast beside me wearing a crown. I had not planned to become a kindergarten cryptid. At Greenhouse B, the beast stopped. Through the panes, rows of potato vines curled under warm light. The all-taker tapped the glass with a hooked digit, then touched its pouch. Tap. Pouch. Tap. Pouch. I stared, brain spinning its wheels, until the memory clunked into place. Yesterday, it had watched me trade a sack of tubers with a hydroponics tech for a bucket of algae gel. Exchange. It had learned the front door. "You want to trade?" I breathed. "You brought me food. Now you want potatoes?" If it could prefer tubers over colonists, that was the best diplomacy imaginable. The security drone buzzed into view, saw giant spiky death, and performed what its manual optimistically called assertive presence. It flashed lights. It broadcast a deterrent tone pitched perfectly to irritate both of us. The all-taker's spines rose like a storm. "Cancel drone." I snapped into my mic. "Negative," Sue said into my helmet. "We can't risk." "It's risking us," I said. "Please." Silence. The drone wavered, uncertain. The all-taker leaned closer to the glass. The nearest kid squeaked. I did the only thing more foolish than talking to the beast. I talked to the drone. "Unit A9, disengage deterrent mode, assume escort. New pattern, orbit me at 5 meters, no lights, no tones." I don't outrank machines, but sometimes tone of voice outranks policy. The drone's LEDs blinked, then, blessed the harried coder who'd left a backdoor, fell into a quiet spiral above my shoulder. The spines lowered. The beast tapped the glass again. Tap. Pouch. It waited. I pulled a potato from my side sack, research snack, don't judge me, and held it up. The all-taker's eyes tracked it like planets. I rolled it toward the door. It nosed the access panel. The panel stayed red. You needed a handprint. The beast looked, from the panel, to me, to the potato, and made a small, frustrated chirr that sounded like a violin string tightened too far. It was trying very hard to be polite. I didn't want to be the reason it learned impoliteness. "Supervisor," I said softer. "Let me open the door." "Dr. Ortega," Sue said equally soft. "If this goes wrong, it will be on your record and your conscience." "It already is," I said. I palmed the lock. The door hissed. The all-taker lowered itself until its head was level with the threshold and, with ceremonial care, set yesterday's bread on the floor. Then it waited, spines rippling in what I was 90% sure meant hope. The colony watched, holding its breath. My heart beat the length of the walkway and back. I picked up the bread, replaced it with the potato, and said very clearly, "Trade." The beast took the potato, tucked it into its pouch with the same delicate, not biting care, and this part one will remember until I am dust, made a quiet humming tone that harmonized with my suit's translator, as if saying a word it had just learned how to sing. Then it turned away from the greenhouse, trotted 3 steps, and dropped a folded thing at my feet, a strip of its own razor quills, woven into a braid. Behind the glass, the kids cheered. The drone, confused, did a loop of polite applause. Supervisor Sue did not speak. The miners on the ridge, watching the feed between shifts, swore creatively and began recalculating their petition. And I understood, with the sudden vertigo of a cliff-edge discovery, the conflict we were already tumbling toward. The All-Taker had decided I was part of its territory, not as prey, but as partner. It would bring me gifts. It would teach me its trades. And anyone who threatened me would learn what All-Taker meant without footnotes. Somewhere in the back of the colony, a siren wailed, long, low, and not a drill. The mining company convoy had returned from the South Flats with a prize and a problem: a stripped cargo crawler, 3 workers missing, and tracks the size of my lab table heading toward us out of the salt pan. Something big had moved into the All-Taker's range. Something that didn't understand trade or children or doors. I looked at the braid of quills and at the beast's 4 patient eyes. "All right," I said softly, as the siren rose and the board pinged my wrist with a priority summons. "Let's find out what you think partner means." The miners didn't get the chance to finish their distress call. The feed cut off in a scream of static just as the convoy's last coordinates painted themselves red across my wrist pad. I stood at the observation deck, watching the horizon through the reinforced glass. Beyond the scarlet dunes, dust plumes twisted like serpents in the wind. Something was moving out there, big enough to disturb the atmosphere, heavy enough to shake the seismic grid. The All-Taker stood beside me, its spines vibrating with low, uneasy tones that made the metal rail hum. It hadn't moved for almost a full minute, and that terrified me more than anything. When the apex predator stops breathing, the universe pays attention. "Easy," I murmured, though my voice cracked under the helmet mic. "We don't know what it is yet." The beast's eyes flickered with violet biolight, tracking the same storm I did. Beneath its claws, the walkway panels dented, metal whining. It let out a short, guttural sound, not a growl, not a threat. "A warning. Supervisor Sue," I said over comms. "Pull your teams back from the southern trench. Whatever hit the miners' convoy is heading here." "Confirmed visual?" she asked. "Not yet. But the All-Taker's afraid." That shut her up for 3 seconds, an eternity for her. "Then, if that's true, we're evacuating the agricultural ring immediately. Dr. Ortega, stay clear. We'll handle containment." "Containment?" I snapped. "You can't contain something that spooks it." But the channel had already closed. The All-Taker shifted, claws clicking against steel, gaze fixed beyond the dunes. It crouched low, spines flattening. My translator read its body language as one word: rival. I stepped forward to the console and pulled up thermal scans. A blur of heat bled across the map, spreading too wide for any single life form, until the algorithm began parsing out fragments. There weren't multiple creatures. There was one. One massive entity, 10 times the All-Taker's size, moving at 60 kilometers per hour straight toward us. The colonists had woken something from the salt flats. I whispered to the All-Taker. "That's what took your kills, isn't it? The thing that hunts even you." It rumbled low, the deck trembling beneath my boots. Then it turned its head toward me, eyes like polished obsidian. For a heartbeat, we simply looked at each other, human and monster, prey and predator, either sure which was which anymore. Then it moved. The All-Taker vaulted over the guardrail and thundered across the colony grounds, scattering dust and terrified engineers. The warning klaxons went off a beat later, useless echoes of what we already knew: the storm had arrived. I ran. The command hub was chaos: colonists sealing bulkheads, drones buzzing overhead, alarms overlapping into meaningless noise. Supervisor Sue barked orders from the central console. Evac pods 1 through 6 are full. Ortega, where the hell are you? Trying to keep us alive, I gasped. You need to shut down the seismic drills. That's what drew it here. The drills are our defense grid, she snapped. We shut those down, and we're blind. It's not coming for the colony, I said, pulling up the external cameras. It's coming for the Alltaker. And we're standing between them. The monitors flickered, static surging across every feed. Then one camera caught it, a glimpse of the thing rising from the dunes. My breath froze. It looked like the bones of a god reanimated by rage, an obsidian leviathan covered in overlapping chitin plates, its head crowned with antennae that pulsed with red heat. Each step it took turned sand into molten glass. The scanners identified its biomass as exceeding our largest habitat dome. The Alltaker met it head-on, roaring. The sound shook dust from the ceiling. Colonists screamed. Someone prayed. Sue shouted, "We're sealing the outer bay!" "Don't!" I yelled, lunging for the override. "If you trap it out there alone, it'll die, and then we're next. Are you proposing we open the gates?" "Yes. Dr. Ortega. Trust me." For the first time since I'd known her, Supervisor Sue hesitated. Then she said quietly, "You have 30 seconds. I slammed the release. The outer barrier groaned open, and the storm's heat hit us like a physical punch. Beyond the gates, the Alltaker leapt, claws extended, colliding with the Leviathan's side. The impact sent shockwaves through the dunes, cracking the ground like glass. The smaller predator darted beneath the creature's strikes with a speed that defied its size, but it was still losing ground. Each blow from the Leviathan carved trenches into the desert, ripping up slabs of molten salt. I knew I couldn't fight alongside it. But I could help it see. "Quarry drone network online," I ordered. The screen lit up with 100 aerial feeds. "Target lock, relay coordinates to the Alltaker." The translator thumped against my chest, resonating with the beast's frequency. I fed the drone telemetry into its range. Positions, trajectories, weaknesses. I wasn't giving it orders. I was speaking its language in data. The Alltaker's spines flared. It understood. It shifted its stance, avoiding the Leviathan's next strike by a hair. Then, in one breathtaking motion, it lunged forward, driving its forelimbs into the creature's side. The air filled with a shriek like tearing metal. Black ichor splashed across the sand, sizzling. The Leviathan stumbled, but didn't fall. The colony's shields buckled under the energy discharge. Sparks rained from the ceiling. "Doctor, get back here!" Sue shouted. "Not yet," I whispered. The Alltaker struck again, carving deep, but the Leviathan twisted, jaws snapping around its torso. The smaller beast screamed, a sound so raw it felt like the planet itself was crying out. I didn't think. I acted. "Manual override, Channel 10. I barked. "Route the geothermal drills to the southern conduit." "What are you doing?" Sue shouted. "Setting a trap." The drill's tremors rippled through the ground. The Leviathan shifted instinctively toward the vibration, right over the vent. I hit the ignition. The earth exploded. A geyser of molten air and plasma burst upward, engulfing the Leviathan's head. The creature staggered, shrieking. The Alltaker wrenched free, collapsing onto the sand. Its spines flickered erratically, light dimming. The Leviathan reared back, burning, and stumbled toward the horizon, half its armor sloughing off like molten tar. It fled into the storm it had brought, leaving only the echo of its screams behind. Silence fell. Then, faintly, a hum, low and pained. The Alltaker tried to rise, faltered. I ran, ignoring Sue's shouts, and crossed the scorched field until I stood beside the wounded beast. Its breathing was shallow, its left side torn open. I pressed a trembling hand to its snout. "You did it," I whispered. "You protected us." Its eyes met mine, dull light flickering. It exhaled, hot wind washing over me. My translator vibrated against my chest, catching fragments of its tone. Trade. Safe. Belong. My throat tightened. Yeah, I said softly. You belong. The beast went still. Its spines dimmed one by one, fading like falling stars. For a long, terrible moment, I thought it was dead. Then, one last flicker. A pulse of light from its chest, directed at me. My pad lit up in sync. The All-Taker had transmitted something, data. Coordinates. What is it? Sue asked behind me, breathless. I looked at the screen. The coordinates weren't for anywhere on Kepri 4. They pointed into orbit. It sent a message, I said. Not to us, to them. It's kind. It's calling them home. Sue stared at the wounded creature, then at the sky. You realize what that means? I nodded. Yeah. The All-Taker wasn't the monster. I looked back at the dunes, where the storm was dying. It was the messenger. The horizon glowed faintly with descending lights, more shapes breaking the atmosphere. Smaller, faster, moving with purpose. Sue's hand went to her pistol. Incoming hostiles? I shook my head. No. Family. The All-Taker's chest light pulsed again, syncing with the newcomer's signals. Its eyes turned toward me one last time, and the translator whispered, "Trade complete." Then it went quiet, finally resting as the other shapes landed beyond the dunes. And for the first time since I'd arrived on Kepri 4, the world didn't feel dangerous. It felt shared. The colony smelled of ozone and fear. You could taste it in the air, that sharp, electric tension before something enormous breaks. I was halfway through patching the greenhouse power grid when the sirens cut through the hum of the turbines. My pad flashed red. Perimeter breach, South Flats. Unidentified hostile mass detected. Through the transparent walls, the horizon shuddered. A moving shadow, wrong in shape and speed, crawled across the salt plain. For a second, I thought it was another storm. Then the seismic sensors registered a heartbeat, one so strong it made the floor panels vibrate. The All-Taker was already there. It emerged from the ravine in a single, breathtaking leap, spines blazing blue-white, claws sinking into the salt like anchors. The sound it made wasn't a roar, it was pressure itself, air collapsing around a core of fury. Every creature within kilometers fled in silence. Even the wind ran away. "Supervisor Sue," I said over comms, "tell your men to stand down. That's not our fight." "Dr. Ortega," she snapped back. "You've got 30 colonists in that ring and a Class 7 Predator in full aggression mode. You think we're going to watch?" "Yes," I said flatly. "Because whatever's out there, it's not hunting us." The cameras confirmed it. A ripple moved across the horizon, the kind you get when heat waves bend light, except it was the ground itself, distorting. Then it broke through the dust, a colossal segmented thing, obsidian shell glinting like volcanic glass, hundreds of legs gripping the salt. Its mouth opened sideways, showing spiral teeth that could chew through a crawler tank. It wasn't a predator. It was an apex event. And the All-Taker, my accidental neighbor, my overly generous monster, was sprinting straight toward it. The colony feed exploded with panic. Drones scrambled. Sue's voice barked orders I didn't hear. I was already moving, grabbing my field kit and sprinting toward the access tunnel. "Dr. Ortega, return to shelter. Not unless you want your dome turned into pudding." I hit the outer hatch, slapped the release, and stepped into hell. The sky was red with dust. The All-Taker and the crawler thing, the miners later called it the burrower, collided like storms crashing. The impact flattened dunes for half a mile. The All-Taker clawed into its carapace, ripping out slabs of black shell. The burrower screamed in seismic frequencies, the ground buckling underfoot. I fell twice trying to get closer. My breath fogged the inside of my helmet. My bones rattled. The All-Taker wasn't winning. The burrow rolled, slamming it against the ground hard enough to crater the plane. Chitin shattered, and a spray of molten ichor splashed across the salt, sizzling like acid rain. The All-Taker staggered, spines flickering erratically. It tried to rise. The burrower's mandibles closed around its midsection. No! I screamed, as if my voice could stop physics. And then, impossibly, the all-taker looked at me. Not at the sky, not at its foe, but at me. 4 eyes locked on my helmet through the chaos. The translator on my chest vibrated so hard it almost cracked. It wasn't sound. It was a pulse. A pattern. Trade. Help. Together. Something inside me snapped into motion. All right, I whispered. You want to hunt together? Let's make it fair. I tapped my wrist pad and rerouted the geothermal grid, every drill, every seismic stabilizer. If the all-taker was baiting the burrower near the vent zone, then we could turn the entire field into a trap. The all-taker dodged another strike, dragging the burrower closer to the geothermal wells. The burrower's claws gouged trenches that glowed from friction. I accessed the old maintenance override, a thing every engineer was told never to touch. My pad screamed warnings. Thermal containment breach. Power cascade imminent. Yeah, I said. That's the point. The all-taker's spines flared again, bright turquoise now. It understood. It slammed its claws into the burrower's flank, forcing it down, pinning its head to the ground like a fisherman pressing a shark. Hold it! I yelled, thumb hovering over the command key. Hold it, big guy! The burrower twisted, impaling the all-taker through the shoulder. The beast shrieked, blood splattering the salt and ribbons of light. My stomach turned. I pressed the key. The world erupted. Every geothermal vent within a kilometer blew at once, turning the salt flat into a sea of fire. The shockwave threw me off my feet. My visor blacked out to protect my eyes. When the dust cleared, the burrower was gone, a molten carcass half buried in slag. The all-taker lay nearby, motionless, smoking, its spines dim. My pad showed a life signature, faint, erratic. I staggered to my feet and ran. Ortega! Sue shouted in my ear. Get back, the field's unstable. Shut up, Sue! The air shimmered from the heat. I knelt beside the fallen beast. Its armor was cracked, one eye dark, breath shallow. The translator on my chest pulsed weakly, matching its heartbeat. Hey, I said softly. You saved them. You saved us. It blinked once, slow and deliberate. The spines along its neck flickered in fading rhythm, 1 pulse, 2, then a pause. My pad translated the signal automatically. Safe. Trade. Yours. No, I said, voice trembling. Not mine. Ours. The all-taker exhaled, a sound like wind over hollow stone. The pulse slowed. I reached out, resting my gloved hand on its scarred snout. For a moment, everything was still, the firelight reflected in its glassy eyes, the colony distant and silent behind us. Then the spines glowed again, brighter this time, in rhythmic bursts, coordinates. My HUD captured the signal. What are you sending me? I whispered. Sue's voice came through the static. Doctor, there's something coming down from orbit. Above us, the sky split open. Dozens of streaks of light descended through the clouds, forming a perfect circle around the colony. For a heartbeat, I thought the burrower's kind had returned. Then my sensors caught the energy signatures, identical to the all-taker's biology. Smaller, sleeker, luminous. Those aren't invaders, I said slowly. Those are its kind. The translator vibrated one last time. Trade complete. More come. And then the all-taker went still. Its biolights dimmed. Silence fell across the flats. I stood frozen, staring at the descending shapes in the sky, dozens of predators descending not to hunt, but to land in formation around the colony, encircling it like sentinels. They didn't roar. They didn't move. They simply stood guard over their fallen kin. My pad pinged with a new signal, incoming transmission, not human. I accepted it. The interface filled with the same harmonics I'd heard the all-taker hum when it traded gifts. A single phrase emerged from the noise. Protect what protects you. I looked down at the great wounded beast, at my unlikely partner, my teacher, and whispered, I will. The spines flickered one last time in answer, like dying stars spelling out gratitude. And above us, the sky filled with guardians. The morning after the storm broke, Kepri 4 was quiet. The kind of quiet that happens only once a planet has screamed itself empty. The dunes were glass now, still steaming in patches where the geothermal vents had burst open. A faint hum rippled underfoot, the dying heartbeat of a wounded world trying to cool itself. The hook was the absence of fear. For the first time since the colony had landed, no one was running, shouting, or scanning for movement on the horizon. We were just listening. Waiting. Because every person on base had seen the same thing, the sky splitting open and the guardians descending. They hadn't attacked. They hadn't spoken. They'd simply encircled the colony, dozens of them, their bioluminescent spines glowing faintly in the pre-dawn dark. They stood like statues carved from midnight, tails tucked, eyes half closed. Watching. Waiting for one of their own who would never rise again. The All-Taker lay where it had fallen, massive, still, half buried in vitrified sand. Its spines were dull now, but faint veins of light still pulsed along its neck, slow as a sleeping breath. I sat beside it for hours, knees pulled to my chest, the heat from the ground seeping into my suit. Supervisor Sue approached at some point, boots crunching on melted salt. "It's not hostile?" she asked quietly, nodding toward the ring of guardians. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe not ever. I think they're mourning." She studied me. "We're evacuating the southern modules anyway. Command wants to know what message you received before it stopped moving." I showed her the pad. The translation shimmered across the screen. "Protect what protects you." Sue's voice softened. "That wasn't a threat? It was a promise." For once, she didn't argue. She turned back toward the colony, muttering, "We'll need a new definition of hazard species." The hours crawled by. The new predators didn't eat, didn't move. When the suns rose, their biolights dimmed, but they remained, silent silhouettes against the dunes. A few colonists ventured closer to film them, whispering like tourists in a cathedral. Children left offerings, stones, shiny metal scraps, a half-burned loaf of my yeast bread. One of the smaller guardians picked it up, sniffed it, and placed it beside the All-Taker's body. Trade accepted. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Near noon, the beast stirred. Just a twitch, a spasm of breath, a flutter of light under its hide. The guardians lifted their heads in unison, humming a low chord that made the ground tremble. I scrambled to my feet, pulse hammering. "Easy," I whispered. "You're safe. You did it." The All-Taker's eyes opened, dull amber, cloudy, but alive. It exhaled a long, shuddering breath that sent dust rippling across the plain. My translator buzzed against my chest, decoding faint harmonics. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," I said. "Someone had to feed the guests." A sound bubbled from its throat, half growl, half laugh. The smaller beasts echoed it, a strange, rolling chorus that vibrated through the dunes. Sue called it terrifying later. To me, it sounded like gratitude. The All-Taker tried to rise but collapsed again, exhausted. I knelt, pressing my hand to its jaw. "You don't have to fight anymore," I murmured. "Let us take care of you for once." It blinked, slow and deliberate. The translator pulsed again. "Trade continues." The guardians moved closer, lowering their heads. One by one, they brushed their spines against its flank, each transferring a faint glow until the dim light along its body brightened again. Energy exchange. Healing through collective resonance. They were giving it back a piece of themselves. I could only watch, tears stinging behind my visor. Humanity had built empires on extraction, but here was a species built on return. By nightfall, the All-Taker stood again, shaky but tall. It looked toward me, toward the colony, then toward the horizon where the burrower's corpse still smoked. Its spines shimmered pale gold, a color I hadn't seen before. The translator whispered, "Safe. Shared. Home." The guardians echoed the word home until the dunes themselves seemed to hum it back. Sue's voice crackled over comms. "Dr. Ortega, they're leaving." And they were. One by one, the Guardians turned toward the desert, vanishing into the glassy horizon. The Alltaker lingered, its massive head lowering until its eyes were level with mine. For a heartbeat, I felt something enormous and warm brush against my thoughts, a pulse like a shared memory. Images, glowing tunnels under salt, younglings learning to hunt, the endless patience of cycles repeating over eons. Then, a single image more personal, me on my walkway, bread in hand, the first day we learned what trade meant. When the vision faded, I realized I was laughing and crying at the same time. "Go on," I whispered. "You've got better things to hunt than us." It hummed once, deep and soft, then turned away, spines flickering brighter with every step until it vanished into the sunrise haze. Days later, the colony stabilized. The board rescinded the extermination order, filed the Alltaker species under sentient symbiotic. The miners grumbled about sharing the desert, but none of them dared shoot at shadows again. Kids painted the beast's silhouette on the dome walls with glowing pigment. I returned to my lab. The anglerfish bones from its first gift hung over my desk now, a reminder that understanding begins with the courage to not be afraid. Sometimes that's all it takes to turn a monster into a neighbor. The final report I sent to Earth was short, against all the scientific impulse in me. The Alltaker has ceased hostile activity. It exhibits complex reciprocity and protective behavior toward the colony. Recommendation: treat contact not as containment, but as coexistence. Kepri-4 remains dangerous, just no longer against us. I paused before sending it, then added one last line. Trade continues. When I stepped outside that evening, the horizon was empty but not lonely. The air smelled of salt and ash, and far away, under the whispering wind, came a faint hum, the sound of guardians moving through the dunes, keeping the promise their kin had made. The humans of Kepri-4 slept soundly that night for the first time since the colony's founding. And when I woke the next morning, there was a new offering on my doorstep, a polished shard of black chitin, curved like a smile, and beside it, a single potato. The beast that hunted everything was gone. But it still remembered how to trade.